They mocked her. They interrupted her. They tried to destroy her reputation, but now they're the ones begging for mercy. Karoline Leavitt had faced tough interviews before. She wasn't new to pushback, especially from liberal media. But this time was different. This wasn't just a debate. This wasn't just a heated exchange. This was an ambush. She had been invited onto the show under the guise of discussing policy. That's how they framed it. But from the moment she took her seat, she knew. The air was thick with tension, not the usual back and forth of differing opinions, but something more hostile, something more calculated. And then, the first attack came. One of the hosts leaned forward, eyes gleaming with the anticipation of a takedown. Their voice carried a sharp edge, not skepticism, but something more sinister. Let's be real, Karoline. You're not here because of your qualifications. You're here because of loyalty. That's why you got the job, isn't it? The audience reacted instantly. Gasps, murmurs, even a few stifled laughs. They wanted a show. They wanted a spectacle. Karoline's face remained steady, unreadable, but inside, she felt it, the shift. This wasn't an interview. This was a performance. And she was the target. But Karoline, she wasn't about to play along. She took a slow, deliberate breath and met the host's gaze head on. I'm here because I earned my place. And if you disagree, let's talk policy, not personal attacks. But they didn't want policy. They wanted blood. Another host smirked, glancing toward the crowd, feeding off the moment. Earned or handed? Because from where we're sitting, loyalty seems to be the only real qualification these days. This time, the audience clapped. Karoline knew exactly what was happening. The segment had been planned, the lines rehearsed. The goal? Humiliation. The next few minutes were a blur of interruptions, dismissive laughs, and leading questions designed to twist her words, make her look incompetent. No matter what she said, this wasn't about conversation, this was about control. But Karoline, she didn't crumble. She fired back with facts. She refused to let them bait her into an emotional outburst. And then, just as the segment was wrapping up, the final, crushing blow. Women like you set us back, you're a pawn, and deep down, you know it. Silence. Even the audience hesitated. Karoline clenched her jaw, not in anger, but in something deeper, a realization. They weren't attacking her because they believed what they were saying. They were attacking her because they were afraid. And that's when she did something they never expected. She smiled, slow, deliberate, unshaken. If standing up for my beliefs makes me a pawn, then so be it, but at least I'm not a puppet. The segment ended, the cameras cut, the damage was done, or so they thought. What they didn't expect was what happened next. The clip hit the internet like wildfire. Within hours it was everywhere. Twitter, YouTube, every conservative news outlet. At first the network tried to control the narrative. They clipped the segment, framed it as just another spirited debate, and pushed their usual headlines, but it wasn't enough because the full unedited version was out, and it painted a very different picture. Conservatives weren't just angry, they were livid. Comment sections exploded with accusations of media bias, double standards, and outright bullying. Even people who weren't Karoline's biggest fans admitted it was brutal. Then, the hashtag started trending. Her media bias, stand with Karoline, cancel the show. But this wasn't just outrage. This was strategic. Viewers flooded the show's advertisers with messages. Why are you funding a platform that openly degrades women just because they don't fall in line? At first, companies tried to ignore it. Then, one of the biggest sponsors pulled out. Their statement was carefully worded, avoiding controversy while making it very clear they wanted nothing to do with this mess. And that was the first domino. More followed. The network scrambled. Damage control mode, anonymous leaks surfaced, reports of panic behind the scenes, executives demanding explanations. And Karoline, she hadn't even said a word yet, because she didn't have to. Then, the whispers started, that Karoline was preparing something big, not just calling them out but taking them down. The lawsuit was official, not just for defamation, but for targeted harassment, for professional damage, and possibly for coordinated media misconduct. The network had weathered controversies before, but this was different, because the more they dug, the worse it got. Leaked internal emails surfaced. One line stood out, make sure she stumbles. Cut her off if she gets too comfortable. That wasn't journalism, that was an ambush. By the next morning, Karoline's lawsuit was front-page news. And the network? They were spiraling. More advertisers backed backed out, ratings plummeted, even some liberal voices admitted this was a bad look. Then, the biggest bombshell. A former producer came forward. She admitted what many had suspected. This wasn't a one-time thing. The show had a history of targeting conservatives. Producers were instructed to push them into uncomfortable moments, cut them off, mock them, control the edit, and she had proof. Emails, memos, unedited footage. And now, this wasn't just a lawsuit, this was an expose. The courtroom was packed. Karoline sat beside her attorneys, calm, focused. The network's legal team, they knew. They weren't just fighting her, they were fighting the truth. And the jury's verdict? We find in favor of the plaintiff. Karoline Leavitt gasps. Shock. The network was ordered to pay millions in damages. They were forced to issue a public apology, and the show canceled. The fallout was brutal. More employees came forward. More unethical practices were exposed. And Karoline, she didn't just survive, she thrived. Speaking engagements, book deals, a stronger platform than ever. But she didn't use it to gloat. Instead, she left the world with this. The media isn't supposed to manufacture reality. It's supposed to report it. And that's a message no one can ignore. If this story made you think, share it, because the conversation about media bias and accountability, it's far from over.